Feel free to take over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dante. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. Very excited about having the opportunity to be able to present to you all. Welcome. Hello from kind of gloomy Florida, but here we go. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kelly Clark. I am an Assistant Director of Recruitment and Training at Florida State University for University Housing. I'm going to give a little bit of a background about who I am so you kind of know the experiences that I have before talking about kind of my work as a middle manager. And so I got my bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Central Florida in Orlando and loved my time there, and then ended up having the amazing opportunity to be a residence life coordinator at Towson University in Baltimore, Maryland. I was there for about 4 years as a coordinator, entry level, and then was given the opportunity to step up into a mid-manager role in mid-2014. And I became an assistant director of recruitment and selection and training at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida. I was there for about 3.5 years, and then made the move here to where I currently am at Florida State University. Just started my 4th year here, and been really enjoying my time, and fingers crossed all goes well. I should be graduating with my MBA at the end of July, which I'm very excited about. So I'm just kind of give you a little brief summary of my experiences and kind of where I'm coming from regarding being a middle manager. So let's just jump right into the presentation. So as Dante mentioned, there's going to be some times for folks to interact and write some things in the chat. And so if you feel uncomfortable with, announcing who you are or anything along those lines, feel free to message host only, or you can change your name if you want to SEAHO. I'm completely fine with that. We'll do like a little bit of a pulse check to see who's all in the room, because I think that that's beneficial and helpful. So if folks could let me know, who's in the room? Who do we have? If you are an entry-level staff member, raise your hand or write in the chat so we can kind of get an understanding of who's all in the room. Are there any entry-level folks? I can't see everyone, so if folks could like raise their hands, I think that's helpful. Or all right, looks like we got a couple. All right, and then mid-level. I think we have mostly mid-level folks in the space, right? Okay. And then I'm assuming there's some sort of upper mid-level and all of those pieces, but wanted to just kind of get a quick pulse check of who was in the space. So I've been attending conferences for the past few years and always feel like there's really a lack of mid-level presentations, or even presentations that talk about what it's like to be a mid-level. I think it's an aspiration for a lot of folks, and nobody ever really talks about their experiences or what it's like. And something I was always looking for, so I thought it was really important to, have that conversation. So a little bit of our presentation and what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be doing a little bit of a story time, talking about some of my experiences and insight as a mid-manager. I'm going to talk about responsibility and what that looks like in the mid-manager role. I'm going to talk about the impact of it, kind of the good, the bad, the ugly of it all, the realities of what it's like to be a mid-manager. And then I'm also going to talk about why it's worth it, because I think it really, really is. So it looks like we're continuing to get a whole bunch of folks in the room. So as we go through, again, my name is Kelly Clark. I'm an Assistant Director of Recruitment and Training at Florida State University. Really excited to kind of be talking about this presentation and talking about what it's like to be a med manager. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off, and if everyone could in the chat tell me what is a perception that you have about mid managers, or you've heard as a mid manager, or anything along those lines. It can be positive, can be negative, it doesn't matter. So if you can write in the chat, what is a perception that you have about mid-managers or you've heard as a mid-manager? I can go first if people are looking for ideas. As an entry-level person, I was convinced that there was no way my supervisor as a mid-manager was in as many meetings as he said he was. I was like, there's no way. That's not a real thing. There's no. Let's see, we have Gateway, paper pushers, middleman, absolutely. They're just there. They're on their own, absolutely. All of these are so great. All of these are great. And I'm not saying that any are right or wrong. I just think that it's important that we kind of see what other people's perceptions are and things that we've heard, because I think it's important that we talk about the realities of what it's like to be a middle manager. And that's a lot of what I'm going to be getting into today. Out of touch, and that they don't respect, they don't work, not respect, they don't directly supervise, stuck in the middle. So many of these things I'm going to be talking about. All right, so you can keep writing, and I'm just going to jump right into talking a little bit more about, you know, what it's like to be a middle manager. So I did a survey with all of my colleagues in the state of Florida who are middle managers, and I asked them, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned as a middle manager? And Dr. Stephen Kluber, who's one of my colleagues, answered this call, and his words really, really hit home. And he said, as a mid-manager, you do. What does that mean? There seems to be this prevalent thought that at the mid-manager level, you just sit around making these grand decrees and instructing other people what to do while doing comparatively little yourself. This is false. He said you need to know your systems. You do not depend solely on others. You need to be highly competent. And it's not just about giving directives. Nothing is not your job, and no work is beneath you. This really hit home with me because as a person who came into a mid-manager role, I didn't realize how many hats I had to wear. I didn't realize what that meant. We often talk to our students about being in a fishbowl and what that means, and that so many more people are going to see you and see the things that you do and have ideas and perceptions about what it is that you do, but don't really know the realities of what it is you do. So I'm gonna tell a quick story. This is where we get into the story time. And so I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me. As we all know, COVID has been rough, right? This pandemic, kind of working our way through all of these things, has been difficult for all of us. And it impacted me in my role in a way that I just really wasn't expecting. As somebody who was in their 6th year as an assistant director, I didn't realize how impactful it was going to be. So the way that it worked here at FSU, March came around, we were getting ready to go to our spring break, and our higher ups said, hey, if students go home, they can't come back for at least 2 weeks after spring break has ended. And then once they are able to come back, we'll kind of give more directions then. And then what ended up happening was students who left were not able to come back for months. They weren't able to come back until June to pick up their belongings. And so we were really processing what that looked like, because we had staff that left. We had students, you know, who left. So our halls weren't full, but we did have staff who stayed. And so trying to figure out their roles. And then we had staff who left and trying to figure out those things. And so essentially my week looked like decisions were being made from higher up, senior level leadership about this certain situation. And then we as a leadership team within our department would meet. We would meet with the on-campus student staff who were working. We would meet with, you know, our staff who was here on campus. We would meet with the student staff who were off campus, trying to give them updates about what was going on. And then we had to make decisions regarding staffing and roll out those staffing decisions. And this happened every single week for 6 weeks. And at the end of those 6 weeks, I had to send out essentially end of contract termination letters to 450 students. And myself and my team struggled so hard with that, because we just, you know, as people who live and breathe recruitment and training and development, to have to be that face of firing in that fishbowl just really changed my entire experience. I say that like April broke me, because I just was not mentally, emotionally prepared to carry that burden, to carry that load of what it meant to all of these students to have this be their experience, or maybe their final experience at the university. And so, you know, I felt like someone who always had to have everything together, but like on the inside was really struggling and really losing it. And so I'm going to ask everyone to just if this is reminiscent of your experience or not, just take a minute and just let's all do a deep breath together, because COVID has not been easy. So we're just all gonna like, let's do like a breathe in, hold it for a sec, and breathe out. Because I gotta tell you, talking with my supervisor, talking with my staff during that time, it was really rough. It was really hard. And so I think it really helped me reframe what it means to be a middle manager. It helped me reframe what responsibility means so that I could help others understand what it means to be a middle manager. Now, this was a very extreme situation, but it was definitely a learning experience. And I thought that it was important to share this message, which is why we're here today. So next, I want to talk a little bit about responsibility, because I talked about how it kind of helped me refresh. So responsibility goes with every job, as we all know. You know, it's this combination of tasks and duties and goals and objectives and us being able to move from one point to another. But authority isn't automatically available with every job. And I think so often people conflate the two. And so a lot of people talked about this in the chat, right? They were saying, you know, not able to make policy, you're not able to make decisions, you know. So as a middle manager, you need to be prepared to own someone else's decisions always, because there's a lot of things that we aren't able to control. So Plato actually came up with this understanding of what responsibility is in sort of a dualistic sense, and that understanding is the responsibility is the behavior attributed to you, or are you just acting as an agent on behalf of someone else? And so responsibility is kind of seen in these two forms. So you have responsibility as accountability, which is you're satisfying those conditions set forth by yourself. So I have a responsibility to go to work every day because I have this job, I signed up to do this, I'm going to get a paycheck, you know, all of those pieces, right? So that's that accountability piece. But then you also have responsibility as attributability. I'm very proud of myself for saying that, by the way, because I constantly mess that word up. And responsibility as attributability is really saying that you are satisfying conditions set forth by others, and you're responsible to those decisions and to those things that are occurring. And so I think it's important that when we're processing through and thinking about our roles as middle managers, where do we lie in the sphere of influence and sphere of control? Like, where does our responsibility lie? And I think so much of it is in this attributability side, where so many people think that it's on that accountability side. This is a tip for those of you that maybe are considering going into mid-level roles, or if you're currently in one. This has really helped me. I keep a little booklet, and in this booklet, I write down like tasks that I have to do, and on the top of the paper, I write the dates that I created these like to-do lists and tasks. And then each year, I use the same book over and over again so that I can go back to what I was doing at this time of year last year to help me build what I need to do for this coming year. Because so much of what we're doing and so much of what it means to be a middle manager doesn't have training. It doesn't have all of those pieces, right? And so I think it's important that we think about how we prepare, how we move forward, and how we can prepare those who are wanting to come in after us of what it means to be a middle manager. So I think it's important we keep in mind these two things, this accountability and this attributability piece. And then what I'm going to do next is talk a little bit about what it means to be a change agent, right? And so many people say, mid-managers can't make decisions, right? You're the middleman. You can't make these decisions without other people and all of these other pieces. And while a little bit of that is true, there's a really amazing experience that you get to have as a middle manager. And so I did a lot of research for this presentation. I looked at a lot of information on Harvard Business Review. Stanford has done a lot of really amazing assessments and studies on what it means to be a middle manager, as well as the Society for Human Resources Management. And so all of these links and these resources are going to be at the end of my presentation in a slide. But I think it's important that we remember that as middle managers, you have to be able to professionally code switch. You have to be able to move from having a conversation with a student in one time frame to maybe 30 minutes later having a conversation with the vice president of student affairs, right? And you have to be able to switch those hats and understand what that means and navigate those political waters. Something one of my colleagues in the state said, he said, you have to be able to talk to every generation. You have to be able to get your message across to a person from every sort of generation that we have. So from baby boomers to millennials to Gen X to Gen Z, you have to be able to communicate what it is that's happening to all of those different people. And that means sometimes changing the way that we're presenting, changing the way that we're talking, all of those pieces. Research has shown that employees in mid-level organizational positions have higher levels of stress because of this professional code switching. And so if you're able to understand that that needs to occur, the stress levels definitely go down. And so I think it's really, really interesting because they all say the same thing. They don't say that mid-level managers are change agents. They say that mid-level managers are change influencers. And I always think that's kind of funny because it reminds me of social media influencers. And I just imagine people making like TikTok videos or Instagram videos who are like, so today we're going to talk about restorative justice, right? And that's kind of what I think about when I think of, what it means to be a change influencer. But I think we're in this really amazing place where we get to sit at the table and provide context and feedback and encourage one side or the other regarding the different things that are going on and being able to share those messages and share those things. And so we don't necessarily have the responsibility to make that decision, but we do have the responsibility to enact it and make sure that we get buy-in from all levels. Right? So you get to influence the decision, you get to influence the process. And I think, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about how you are sitting in this like really amazing place to be able to do all of those things. But I think it's just important that we remember we're not necessarily the change agents, but the change influencers, and turning that little switch is going to help you navigate these political waters that you're going to be in as a middle manager. Because again, you have to own other people's decisions on a day-to-day basis. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask another question and I want you to put it in the chat. So I know I've talked a lot about what it means to be a middle manager and kind of navigating all of these things, but if you are a current mid manager, what excited you about being a middle manager? Or if you're an entry level, what excites you about being a middle manager? So I want you to write in the chat. Someone said, I wonder if stress levels of people's color is high when considering code switching. Yes, actually, the studies do show that it is higher and it's actually the highest in women. Yeah. I have a really cool study. So if you want to message me, Erin, I can definitely show you some of the feedback and research that's been done during the time of COVID. So let's see, the excitement was process development versus process implementation, supervising full-time staff, mentoring, influence, thanks Turner, leave a legacy, grow, strategic thinking. Awesome, some of these are so great. Okay, so now I'm gonna go into like why it's amazing to be a mid manager, or why be a mid manager at all. If you're like, why, if I don't get to make decisions, like why would I want to do that? And here's why I think it's so important. So I'm going to talk about 4 different things, and here are the 4 main reasons why I think being a mid manager is amazing. 1, you get to gain so much experience politically, financially, personally. Politically, you get to sit at tables and be present in spaces where you weren't necessarily able to be present for before. And so you're getting exposed to kind of those inner workings, like you're seeing behind the curtain in Oz, to see what's going on and how decisions are made. And it really helps with that context and understanding. Financially, again, you're seeing information regarding larger budgets, departmental, divisional, university budgets that you maybe have never seen before. And personally, you get to grow and develop more than you ever have. I say that in the first year of being an assistant director, I grew professionally more than I did as a coordinator in an entry-level position. I learned more about myself as a professional and what it meant to be a mid-level person during that first year. It was so helpful to me because I learned what it meant to be a supervisor to full-time staff. I learned what it meant to sit at those tables and get all of those experiences, and how lucky I was to be able to do those things. So I think that that experience that you're gaining is just amazing. Next is you get to bridge the gap. generationally, experientially, and technologically. So I talked about it before, but my colleague Turner talked about how you have to be able to manage and communicate with all the different generations that are maybe sitting at that table, right? So you're talking to your Gen Zers, when you're talking to your students, you're talking to your, student staff, you're talking to your millennials and Gen Xers, when you're talking to current staff and your supervisors, and then you have your boomers who are going to be like senior level leadership and all of those other sort of pieces. So you get to be able to understand what it means to talk to all those different types of people and understand kind of that like code switching and communication style that's really helpful. Experientially, as a mid-level person, you are often the person who is most recently entry level at that table. So you're able to bring in context and understanding of things that people who are 10, 15, 20 years out from an entry level role might not understand. Something that I say all the time is, someone would say, oh, when I was a coordinator, if I just needed to talk to a student, I would just go to their room and talk to them. It's not that easy nowadays, right? Because you have to create a case, right? So that you can track that you've talked to them. You have to write notes about what you talked about. You have to check and see if they have any other issues to see if they need to process through. You want to make sure that you're following up with folks, and there's all of these different things and layers that have been added over the past few years technologically that make that not such a simple task, but they're not understanding that because they're understanding their experience from 15, 20 years ago, right? And then technologically, so each generation comes along with more and more technologically advanced experience. And so you are being able to bring in a way that we're able to work smarter, not harder. I often talk about when I left Towson in 2014, everything was still being done with pencil and paper. Everything. Room switches, everything. And I was able to introduce, like a virtual check-in process, and it was unbelievable to them, but it was just something that they had never thought of before. And so like you being able to have that and bring that to the table is just such an amazing opportunity and experience for you and everyone sitting there. Next is you have the ability to influence and create. Administratively, you get to help overhaul processes that go back to that work smarter, not harder. When I was at Florida Atlantic University, I was able to help the department save over $20,000 a year by streamlining paperwork, because they had two different types of RCRs that had the individual buildings on every single one and 5 different types of triplicate forms for lockouts, key changes, emergency information, etc. And by consolidating all of those into one form, we were able to save thousands and thousands of dollars. And so again, you're able to have this influence and create, and it's really amazing. Programmatically, you get to have insights and ideas and creativity to shape that program and to help create new programs that you think are important for our student staff to experience, our students and student staff. And then individually, you learn so much about yourself, like I mentioned, as a professional. And lastly, you get to leverage your experience. Relationally, you're that person who has most recently sat in the seat of those entry-level staff, and you can build relationships with them through that. Professionally, you get to build those connections across the state and region. I've been able to really connect with my mid-level professional staff members in the state of Florida because I was asking about this experience, and I was saying, hey, can you fill out this survey for me? And let's talk a little bit more. Let's have a Zoom chat. And I'm talking to people who I've never spoken to before, and I've never had these experiences before, but you get to have that opportunity as a mid-level. And then lastly, advocate. Advocately isn't a word, I don't think. I just put LY because I wanted them to all rhyme. But like you get to advocate. So once again, you get to leverage those experiences and say, actually, that's not what it's like. Actually, I think it's important that you understand the context, and you can do that to both sides of the table. So again, these are some of the really amazing reasons why being a mid-manager is so awesome. So I did ask my colleagues in the state, what is the biggest piece of advice you have for aspiring mid-managers? And these were their responses. It came down to 3 different things. The first is that there is politics. There are politics everywhere you go, but you understanding them at an institutional, department, and personal level is really going to help you understand how to fit in and how to work as a team collaboratively to help make decisions. This position is very experiential, right? And that's the next portion, is that it is, you have to learn how to navigate both sides. There's a lot less formalized training and a lot more trial and error and perspective gathering. And so you're learning how to navigate both sides. You're learning how to manage up and down, and you are learning how to balance that personnel and administrative work, right? So I think these were the themes, the common themes that I was getting from everybody who responded to my survey. And the last is that it's very hands-on, as I was mentioning. It's very experiential. There's less formalized training. It's really all about learning as you go. So a lot of this information was in most part collected from people who were in their first to like 1 to 3 years of being a mid-level manager. Just they were talking about like, these were things that they had. So like if you're looking to become a mid-level manager, understanding these 3 things are going to help you as soon as you step into the role. Whoops, I went too far. But one of the questions that we had is, what is the piece of encouragement you have for current mid-managers? And we asked this. And so my previous supervisor, the interim director at FAU, Catherine Kelman, said, you are making an impact, mid-level managers. You are valued. It may not always be said by higher ups or those you supervise, but you're the unsung heroes of the department. I truly, honestly believe that. I often say, like, you go to a banquet and end of the year, celebration, and there's always like an RA of the year and a student staff of the year and a grad of the year and a coordinator of the year, and it stops there. Right? Not saying that mid-level managers have to get awards or anything like that, but so often I feel like we're the unsung heroes and we're doing so much in the background that people may not know about. So like, please know that like, as a mid-level manager, I see you, I know what you're doing, I appreciate you. I think it's good. And then the next is that another colleague, Natalie at FGCU, said, being a mid-level manager is one of the hardest roles in the department. Your staff is most likely not going to understand your role until they get there, and that's okay. So I think it's really important that we're talking about those things, that we're supporting one another at the different institutions that we're in, and that we're also giving grace. There's been so much that has happened because of COVID and during COVID, and I think that we've all just really doubled down to try to make sure that our students and student staff and employees are having an amazing experience. And so even though there have been some unfortunate things that have happened, I had, the face of firing and my mid-level misfortune of like having to do what I needed to do back in April when I had to let everyone go, and my team had to have all of those meetings and make all those letters and do all those things. It still has been so educational. It still has been such an amazing experience. And so I did want to thank everyone who participated in my survey. So these were all the folks who responded, mid-level folks around the state of Florida, who took the time to fill out my survey, and their answers and their encouragement and all of those pieces. And so this is a link to all of the references that I had and that I looked at when I was preparing for this presentation. And if folks want, I can absolutely send that to you all. And Dante has put the evaluation in the chat box, but what I want to do now is open up to questions and answers and have some time to be able to chat about things, because I think that's really important for us to be able to have some time to process and talk through some stuff. So thank you all so much for your attention during the presentation, and I'm going to open it up for any questions or anything that folks might have that they want to talk about.
Hi, Kelly. I'm Melissa Nevers from Piedmont College down here in Georgia. I've been an assistant director for almost 4 years. Mm-hmm. And something I wanted to ask, in your experience with COVID is, how do you know when being a mid-manager is okay to be stuck in for the time being? How do you feel that way? Because we don't really have a pandemic code of moving up or moving on.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that when it comes to being a mid-manager, I think there are all of these perceptions of like, well, I'm going to be entry level for 3 years, and then I'm going to be a mid-manager for 5 years, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. There is no right way. There's no experience. I tell this to grads all the time when they're going through TPE, like you can't compare your experience to others. I never thought that I was going to be an assistant director for 7 years and presenting about what it means to be an assistant director and a mid-level manager. I never thought that that was what that was going to be. And I think it's about, you know, what's right for you and what's right for your experience. And I think that whenever you're thinking about moving forward or moving on to the next role, the question you need to ask yourself is, am I running towards something or am I running away from something? And I think that that is really going to help help you decide what's right for you. Because I think running away from something, like, I get it, I understand there are some times when you may not be in a great situation, and you may need to just make whatever is the best decision for you. But I think if you're in a place where you're in a good position and you feel comfortable with what it is that you're doing, that you really want to be trying to look towards something. You want to be running towards like the next great step for you, and that's going to look different for everyone. And so yeah, I think, and Jessica wrote it in the chat, I think that's really helpful too. As long as you feel like you're still learning and growing, and you'll know when it's time to move on or move forward. I just don't compare yourself to other people and other people's experiences, or these weird expectations or perceptions that folks have about who needs to move on when. I have friends who have been assistant directors for 20 years because this is the role that they love. This is the thing that they love to do. And I have people who were assistant directors, you know, mid-level managers for a handful of years, and they were like, yeah, it is what it is. I'm on to the next, you know? So I would say it's up to you, but if you definitely want to chat more, I'd be happy to connect. Yeah. Any other questions? Someone asked, advice on being a mid-manager with collaborating with other departments across campus. That's a good question. Hey, Corey, good to see you. I think that being a mid-manager is when you're collaborating with campus partners, I think it's really helpful to try to connect with them prior to when you need to connect with them, if that makes sense. Like, so for me in my role, I do recruitment and training. And something that one of my colleagues did in the state, Turner, over at FAMU, which is, you know, a hop, skip, and a jump away from FSU, he messaged me in February and was like, hey, we're both in the same position, let's connect. And I said, you know, that's a really good idea. So we started talking, and we found a way for our staffs to be able to collaborate and connect during training times. So the FAMU RAs and the FSU RAs usually get together once a year to be able to socialize, connect, talk. And I think that that's a great way to build relationships. And I think that that's really helpful too when you're thinking about on-campus partners. And so if you know that there's a certain person who you're going to be working with or you're wanting to work with, connecting and getting to know them as like a person is really helpful. And then whenever you do need something, or whenever they need something, they have a good point of contact, but also you're able to easily communicate with them because you've already gotten past that awkward stage of like, well, who are you and what do you do and what do you want and when do you need it by, right? So I think that's really a helpful piece too. The meeting before the meeting, yes. Someone asked, you talked about code switching. Transparency, yep. Navigating conversations. Ooh, that's a good question. Something that I've had, like some of the conversations that I've had to have with students is I was like, just because you really want to know the answer right now doesn't mean I'm able to give it to you. And I know that that's a really frustrating place to be, but what can I do with you? What do you need from me to know that like I'm giving you as much information as possible to help you get to a place where you feel like you can trust that I'm doing what I can and giving what I can in this moment. And I think by being transparent and vulnerable yourself in that space helps open them up to feeling like they can trust you a little bit more. It's going to be hard. I do think that our Gen Z folks are having a really tough time with not understanding politics and not understanding decisions and why they're being made and when and all of those pieces. And even sometimes when you try to explain, they still don't understand. They feel like you're being defensive. They feel like you're just giving a stock answer. And I think that that's something that I am currently struggling with and navigating, and I'll just be vulnerable in this moment, is that, you know, even trying to to explain to staff, like, you signed a contract to do this job, and if you're not fulfilling these things, then we can't continue to have you on the team. And then, you know, it's just, this is unfair, you're targeting me, or all of those things. And so being able to kind of process through some of those things with them, and there's sometimes that you're going to be able to have that connection, and then there's sometimes that you just aren't. But I will say that that's something that I'm struggling with a little bit too. But I think trying to be as transparent and vulnerable as you can with them helps bridge that gap, because that's what they're looking for. They just want to know that, like, they're not getting the runaround, they're not getting the dismissal. And that would be kind of, yeah, helping them understand what context you can, I think, is good. Jessica kind of hit the nail on the head and said, look how long decisions take to be made. So something that we did, we have a student staff advisory council, and they were talking about, they didn't understand finances, they didn't understand why people were being let go during COVID and all of those things. And Holly, my amazing coordinator, was able to sit down with them and say, okay, here's our budget. We have to cut $2 million from this budget. Tell me what you would cut. Well, you can't cut the lights and electricity and water, you know, and you can't cut this. And legally, we have to have this many staff, and, you know, was helping them kind of process through. And eventually they came to the understanding of, like, why we make the decisions that we make. So that's another thing that maybe can help, is if you find someone who you're able to really connect with on a student level, generational level, who really can understand what it is that you're saying and can help like contextualize and process through, like, why decisions are being made, they can help translate that message. They can help kind of be your ally in that moment. I think that's good too. Managing, supporting entry-level personnel without hand-holding them to meet expectations. I think that's a good question too. I think the one of the things that I can say is that with entry-level professional staff, asking them at the very front, like, what is it that you want to get out of this role? What is it that you're wanting to do to move forward? And how can I help you get there, right? And so I often say to my team, the best professional development I can give to you during your first year is for you to do your job exceptionally well. Because once you've managed to hit that nail on the head, once you've been able to say, I'm good, I know exactly how to do X, Y, and Z every single day, you know, and there's going to be some hand-holding moments in that first year. There's going to be some trial and error, because that's how it is with every job, right? You know, I have some moments where I have trial and error, and I have to talk to my boss and ask her some things, and I've been in it for over a decade, right? But saying to them, like, all right, so during that first year, and then after you've kind of really perfected the art of doing your role, let's talk about next steps. Let's talk about what else we can add to your plate. Let's talk about how you can move forward and what I think would be really helpful for you, or what is it that you're wanting and how can I help you get there? I think that kind of processing with them and talking to them about different things. I did have a staff member at a previous institution who was an entry-level staff member who I really felt like I had to do a lot of that hand-holding with. He was hired in the middle of the year. It was a very hard transition. And so what we did every one-to-one was we focused on a different area of development. And so we really kind of like honed in on like that one particular thing, and kind of went from like priority, like most high priority to low priority, right? And said, okay, well, let's talk about this and how to set you up for success. And so by being able to like intentionally talk about the things that were upcoming with them, it helped them feel more prepared for that process, even though they weren't in training with everyone else, even though they weren't ready for that, or they hadn't experienced it yet. Being able to kind of process through those things was really, really helpful. Yes. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this. Let's see, Polly had a question. So how do you have conversations regarding empathetic leadership with those above you? That's a good one. Managing up is something that you definitely learn how to have. You have to learn how to do as a middle manager. I am so lucky in that my direct supervisors have been able to hear me verbally process, because that's who I am, like as a person. Like I verbally process with them in like a closed door like setting, and then I say, okay, how can we move forward? What can we do? How can we get to a place where we can help them understand where we're coming from? So I think a lot of times, yes, I agree, Erin, managing up is a whole other presentation in itself. When it comes to those above, whenever they're making decisions, sometimes you're just going to get handed things and you're just going to be told like, hey, you need to do this. And you're not going to get the context and you're not going to get the why. And it's all about like, what battles do you think are important? Like, what is this the hill that you really want to die on? And sometimes it is. And sometimes it's important. And I think you need to stick to your guns when it is. And I think you need to say, here's the conversation that I think is important. And I think being able to have a good enough relationship with either your immediate supervisor or their immediate supervisor to say like, hey, do you have a few minutes to chat? I have a couple of concerns and here are my concerns, and being able to process through that with them, because even if they aren't able to change their mind or aren't able to change the decision that's being made, they've at least heard that and they can keep it in their mind for the next decision, right? Because again, and we also have to remember that even though we're in the middle, sometimes our supervisors are in the middle. Sometimes they're getting decrees from the president and the board of governors and the board of trustees, and they're just enacting the things that have been told to them. And so I think this goes back to that like sphere of influence of being able to say like, hey, I just want you to know that like, I understand you think it might be really great to have a conversation with them right now, but another virtual meeting on their calendar after they've just helped with new RA interviews and this conference and grad interviews and are getting ready to do this, that might not be the most beneficial way or like the best way to connect with them. So do you have any, I have a couple of ideas. I don't know if you're wanting to hear them, and being able to have a good enough relationship to be able to say those things to them and them not feel like it's an attack or a complaint, I think is really good. I think I'm really lucky in that I have a whole bunch of very supportive and willing to listen higher ups who respect and understand like my years of experience, and I can say like, hey, I think it's important that we have this conversation. I think it's important that we talk about it. So I will say, let's see, my previous director said it was, well, for new professionals, a car analogy. The first year, the passenger along for the ride, the second year in the passenger seat, the third year you're in the driver's seat all on your own. Yes, absolutely. I will tell you that this position that I started in was the first position that I had a transition report or any sort of helpful documentation in my transition. And it's rare. I will tell you, it's very rare as a middle manager to get a transition report, an end of the year report, or any sort of like formalized training. My previous supervisor and I used to joke that she just threw me a set of keys and said, here you go. See you at our one-to-one on Thursday, right? And so sometimes you're really just kind of thrown into the deep end, and it's about figuring out what it means to be a middle manager and what are your day-to-days. And that's why I think this book, like I was mentioning, is so helpful. If you are a first-year middle manager, write down what you do every single day. Like write down the tasks that you're completing, and then you can break it up by like days, weeks, months, and that way the following year you'll know exactly what it is that you need to get done because you've already done it. Right? You've already been through that experience. You've already known what's coming up and you can prepare. And that way, again, you're moving from that, like you're just on the ride to like you're in the passenger seat, right? And you're able to kind of take more control and have a more ownership of that sphere of influence that you have. Right. AD year at a glance, way too many things slip through the crack. Yeah, absolutely. I am the kind of, I'm very OCD, like very organized, all of those pieces. I start writing my transition report on my first day. I know that sounds insane, but because I just start writing all of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis to help me understand what it means. And so for every process, for everything that I'm in charge of, every project, so that whenever it is time for me to leave, it is time for me to transition, I don't have to worry about trying to filter through years and years and years of experiences. I can say, here's where this is, here's where this is, all of those pieces. And at the end of every year, I make sure that I put that all in like a folder on like our share drive or something. And then I link it in my transition report so that people can go and click into it and say, all right, here's every single thing that I may need. Here's emails, communications. I save everything because I'm a crazy person. But I think that something like that is really helpful. And it sounds so weird, but like, absolutely, something like this has been so beneficial to me. All right, I'll do one more quick question. I'd love to learn how people prioritize what to share with their supervisors and one-to-ones. So this might sound really redundant, but we do weekly reports here, and I have a weekly one-to-one with my supervisor. So the things that I think are important for her to know, just contextually, information wise, I put in my weekly report. And then in my weekly report, there's a section that says things I would like to discuss with you in our one-to-one, and I bullet out all the things that I want to talk to them about. And then I come prepared with a list, and I say, all right, I have about 10 things that I need to talk to you about. And every week she talks to me about things that she had on her list to discuss. And it really helps us be productive with our time, because as I mentioned earlier, assistant directors are just always in meetings. Like, we're just constantly going from one meeting to the next. And so that's something that's helped me, and hopefully that will help you. I kind of break it down by the different areas of oversight that I have, my supervisees, you know, my functional areas, all of those pieces. And then I have a section at the very end that says things I'd like to discuss in our one-to-one. So we meet on Thursdays. I turn in my weeklies on Monday, and that really helps so that she has all of this kind of background information. And then she and I can really spend that time in our one-to-one discussing the things that need more discussion, more elaboration. Okay, I know we're hitting our time. I just want to thank you all so much for coming to my presentation. I really appreciated having you all here. It was good to see you. Thank you for your questions. This is my email address. If you have any questions or want to connect with me, happy to talk more.